When I first moved into Evergreen Hills, I thought I had found peace. A quiet, tree-lined neighborhood in the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona, where every lawn looked like a magazine spread and every driveway gleamed with polished SUVs. I had just gotten out of a long, bitter divorce and used what little savings I had to put a down payment on a cozy two-bedroom bungalow. It wasn't much, but it was mine, my sanctuary. Within the first week, I was approached by a woman named Lorraine, who introduced herself as the president of the Evergreen Hills Homeowners Association. She wore beige like it was a uniform, had shoulder-length blonde hair that didn't dare move in the wind, and walked like every inch of the sidewalk belonged to her personally. "Welcome to our community," she said with a rehearsed smile. "You'll need to pay the mandatory HOA membership fee. It's $400 a month due on the 1st. My jaw almost hit the porch. $400 a month, that wasn't in the contract when I bought the place. Lorraine's smile tightened like she'd sucked a lemon. "It's in the bylaws, page 74, section 12.6c. I knew she was bluffing. I had read the entire stack of papers twice before signing anything. There was no mention of a mandatory fee, and besides, Evergreen Hills wasn't a gated community. There were no amenities, no pool, no security patrol, just pristine lawns and manicured hedges. "I'm sorry," I told her firmly. "Unless you can show me where I signed something agreeing to this, I'm not paying." Her eyes narrowed, but she nodded curtly and left without another word. I should have known that wouldn't be the end of it. Over the next few weeks, strange things started happening. My mailbox was smashed twice. I got warning letters for excessively loud music, even though I lived alone and rarely turned on the radio. One day, I came home to find a bright orange sticker slapped on my door that read, "Non-compliant resident subject to fines." I peeled it off and called the number listed at the bottom. A bored woman on the other end said I was being penalized for failing to maintain community standards, whatever that meant. I ignored it. Then came the letter, hand-delivered and stamped with a gold seal, from the HOA, informing me that I owed $1,600 in back dues and an additional $500 in fines. I took it straight to a lawyer who confirmed my suspicion. They had no legal authority to enforce the fees. The neighborhood wasn't technically an HOA community. It was a voluntary association masquerading as mandatory, preying on newcomers who didn't know any better. I should have felt triumphant, but instead I got scared. Because someone was watching me. I'd catch glimpses of Lorraine standing across the street, arms crossed, glaring at my house. Once I saw her speaking with a police officer in front of my yard. When I stepped outside to ask what was going on, they both turned and walked away like I didn't exist. Then, one Thursday morning in late September, I came home from work to find my back door wide open. At first, I thought I'd been robbed. Kitchen cabinets hung open, drawers dumped onto the floor. My clothes were thrown out of the dresser, some even slashed with what looked like a box cutter. But what made my heart plummet into my stomach was the small wooden jewelry box on my nightstand, emptied. The ring, my grandmother's ring, an 18-karat white gold sapphire piece she'd given me on her deathbed, it was gone. The only valuable thing I owned. I called the police, of course. They came, dusted for fingerprints, asked the usual questions. No signs of forced entry, nothing on the cameras from the neighbors' security systems, most of them HOA members who suddenly claimed their systems had glitched or weren't recording. It didn't add up. I started noticing things. Lorraine drove a new Lexus that hadn't been there the week before. Her husband, whom I'd only seen mowing the lawn in beer-stained t-shirts, now wore gold cufflinks that shimmered in the sun. A nosy neighbor named Cheryl, who'd always been cold toward me, suddenly had a Cartier bracelet. But the police refused to follow up. Without evidence, they said, there's not much we can do. It didn't help that Lorraine had close ties to the city council. Her brother was a deputy sheriff. Her cousin worked for the zoning commission. She had her fingers in every local pie, and I was just a nobody who refused to pay her fake dues. But I wasn't going to let this go. I started digging. Every night after work, I'd comb through public records, HOA documents, surveillance footage, anything I could get my hands on. I filed a formal complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate. I contacted a local investigative journalist. I even made a Reddit post that started to gain some traction. People began messaging me, former residents of Evergreen Hills and other neighborhoods where Lorraine had been involved. The stories were chilling. One man claimed she'd harassed him until he sold his house at a loss. Another said she'd falsified fines and liens to pressure people into paying fake dues. A woman from 2 blocks over swore Lorraine had threatened to have her dog taken away for violating a pet-size ordinance that didn't exist. And every single one of them had lost something personal: jewelry, family heirlooms, expensive electronics, always during mysterious break-ins that never led to arrests. I wasn't alone, and that, oddly enough, gave me power. But before I could figure out my next move, something happened that forced me to act faster than I ever planned. I was sitting in my car late one night, parked a few houses down, watching Lorraine's place. That's when I saw it. Her husband lugging a box into their garage. He struggled with it like it was heavy, and when the light hit it just right, I saw the sticker on the side. It was the box my grandmother's ring had come in, my jewelry box, the one I kept locked inside my nightstand drawer. They had it. They weren't even hiding it. That night something inside me snapped. Not fear, not anger, something else. A righteous fire I hadn't felt in years. They thought I was just another quiet woman who would roll over. They didn't know who they were messing with. This wasn't just about a ring anymore. It was war. I didn't sleep that night. My body sat in my bed, but my mind paced every square inch of my house. I kept replaying the image of Lorraine's husband carrying my jewelry box like it belonged to him. The sheer brazenness of it boiled my blood. They weren't just stealing, this was psychological warfare. They wanted me to know they could do whatever they wanted, and no one would stop them. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I had a plan forming, jagged and half-baked, but it was something. I needed evidence, real, irrefutable proof. The police wouldn't lift a finger without it, and if I wanted to drag Lorraine's little kingdom into the light, I had to do it on my own terms. First, I got a small body cam off Amazon, rush delivery. Then I went to the local hardware store and picked up a cheap but effective Wi-Fi camera disguised as a smoke detector. I installed it inside my living room pointing at the main hallway, just in case they tried something again. My front and back doors got reinforced with new locks, and I rigged both with door sensors linked to my phone. If they stepped foot in my house again, I'd know immediately. But I wasn't just waiting around anymore. I started talking to my neighbors, really talking to them, not the polite nods and waves we exchanged on trash days or while trimming hedges. I walked the street and knocked on doors. The first few weren't helpful, either deeply entrenched in HOA loyalty or too afraid to speak. Then I met Felix. He lived in a split-level ranch 2 houses down from me. Vietnam vet, retired mechanic, walked with a cane but had a mind sharp as barbed wire. He had this weary look in his eyes like he'd seen too much but wasn't done fighting. When I told him what had happened, his face darkened. "She got to you too, huh?" he said, motioning for me to come inside. Felix showed me a drawer full of violation letters, most of them handwritten, non-compliant yard lighting, unapproved mailbox shape, garage door open too long. None of it was real. The HOA bylaws, what few existed, were vague at best, but Lorraine had weaponized them. "She fined me over $6,000 in 1 year," he said. "Tried to put a lien on my house. I fought it, took her to court. Judge tossed the case." "Then why is she still here?" He looked at me like I'd asked why fire was hot. "She's connected, knows how to make people disappear, socially, financially. Most folks either give in or move out." I told him about the ring, about the break-in, about seeing my jewelry box in their garage. He didn't even hesitate. "We'll get it back," he said. Over the next few days, Felix introduced me to more residents. Rosa, a nurse with 3 kids who'd been fined for hanging laundry outside. Carter and Mel, a gay couple who'd been told their front porch furniture was too flamboyant. And Miss Leona, a 78-year-old widow whose husband's military medals went missing after an HOA safety inspection. We started meeting in secret in Felix's garage. He still had some surveillance gear from his days fixing police radios, and he knew how to get around security systems. We called ourselves the paper chain, because one weak link in Lorraine's web could unravel the whole damn thing. Our goal was simple: catch her in the act, not just hearsay, not just stories. We needed footage, audio, a smoking gun. Then one afternoon, Rosa came rushing into Felix's garage, out of breath and shaking. "They're doing it again," she said, "a routine inspection. My neighbor said Lorraine and her husband were seen entering your backyard." I didn't wait. I opened the camera app on my phone and pulled up the feed from the living room. And there they were. Lorraine and her husband, both gloved, walking through my hallway like they lived there. She carried a clipboard. He had a small duffel bag. They opened my drawers, rummaged through my kitchen, checked behind picture frames. I could hear them talking through the cam mic. "Make it look like another break-in," Lorraine said. "If she can't prove it, she can't pin it on us." "I'll grab a couple things, nothing major," her husband replied. "You think she noticed the ring was real gold?" "She's too dumb to know what she had." I stared at the screen, heart thudding in my throat. Lorraine opened my linen closet and pulled out my tablet. She stuffed it into her bag. It was all there. Every word, every moves. They were inside my house at that very moment, and I had them on camera. I called the police as I sprinted out my door and drove straight home. Rosa came with me, recording the entire thing on her phone. By the time we got there, Lorraine and her husband were stepping out of my backyard gate, completely casual, like they'd just been watering my plants. I didn't say a word, I didn't need to. The police arrived 15 minutes later. And that's when things took a turn. The responding officer, a young guy named Ruiz, seemed hesitant when I showed him the footage. He watched the video on my phone, eyebrows raised, lips twitching like he didn't know what to say. "This is serious," I said. "This is burglary. I want them arrested." Ruiz looked up from the phone. "I believe you, but you need to know, Lorraine's brother is Lieutenant Simmons. If I book her, I have to go through him." "So," he hesitated, "so I'll do it by the book, but be ready for pushback." He took statements, bagged my tablet as evidence, and to his credit, he did write up a report. Lorraine and her husband weren't arrested on the spot, but they were escorted off my property. Lorraine's face was red as wine. She didn't say a word. Her eyes burned with hate. But it was done. The walls were cracking. That night I uploaded the footage to 3 places: a secure cloud, my lawyer's inbox, and a burner email I'd created specifically for the press. Then I posted it. Reddit, Twitter, Facebook. A simple caption: "My HOA president broke into my home because I refused to pay fake dues. She stole my dead grandmother's $18,000 ring. Here's the proof." It exploded. Within 12 hours, the video had over 200,000 views. By the next morning, it was on the local news. Then the national outlets picked it up. People started coming forward from all over the country, sharing eerily similar stories: fake HOAs, abuse of power, stolen property, threats, silence. Suddenly, Evergreen Hills was ground zero for something much bigger. But the story wasn't over. Because Lorraine wasn't done. And neither was I by the time the news vans showed up. Evergreen Hills didn't look so peaceful anymore. My front lawn became a revolving door of reporters, curious neighbors, and even a few law students asking for interviews. One woman drove from 3 towns over just to thank me for speaking up. She'd lost her late father's coin collection in a suspicious inspection orchestrated by her HOA. The comments section on my video became a digital town hall. The fire Lorraine had lit when she broke into my house had turned into a wildfire she could no longer control. And yet somehow she still tried. 2 days after the footage went viral, I received an envelope under my door. No stamp, no name. Inside was a single sheet of paper that read, "Drop the accusations, retract your statement, final warning." I didn't flinch. I called my lawyer, forwarded everything, and then I doubled down. Felix helped me rig up 2 more hidden cameras outside my property. Rosa had a friend in it who offered to monitor my cloud storage remotely in case anything went missing again. And Carter, God bless his flair for drama, printed flyers with stills from the break-in footage and handed them out at the HOA's emergency board meeting. The flyer's header read, "Is this who you trust with your house keys?" The board tried to spin it, claimed the video was out of context, that Lorraine had received permission to enter my property, but the footage told the truth plain as daylight, and the media wasn't buying her rehearsed statements anymore. A local anchor even referred to her as Phoenix's porch pirate queen live on air. I saved the clip. That week, 3 board members resigned. The paper chain grew. Leona brought a box of old newsletters she'd saved, ones Lorraine had mysteriously removed from the community website. They revealed a disturbing trend. Every non-compliant resident Lorraine had fined or harassed had something valuable taken during or after one of her so-called inspections. A gold watch, a collection of antique baseball cards, a Rolex, a signed first edition of To Kill a Mockingbird. Rosa uncovered an even deeper layer. While digging through court records, she found that Lorraine had declared bankruptcy 8 years prior. Then out of nowhere, her finances skyrocketed. Her husband's landscaping business had no listed employees, no tax records, yet they drove luxury cars and took vacations in Aruba. She was laundering, most likely through fraudulent HOA fees and stolen property. It was a criminal enterprise. We just knighted to prove it. Meanwhile, Lorraine was unraveling. Her once perfect hedges grew wild. Her blinds stayed shut all day. Her husband was seen packing up boxes late into the night. A few neighbors spotted moving trucks in her driveway, though nothing ever left the property. Rumors flew, but one thing was clear: she was scrambling. Then one morning I woke up to find my tires slashed, every single one, nails scattered in my driveway like confetti, a dead rat in my mailbox. I called the police again. This time, Officer Ruiz wasn't the one who showed up. It was Lieutenant Simmons, Lorraine's brother. He didn't even pretend to be impartial. "I think you've caused enough chaos in this neighborhood, ma'am," he said, his voice heavy with contempt. "People are frightened, harassed, losing sleep." "You mean Lorraine is losing control?" I shot back. "Funny how no one lost sleep when she broke into my house." He stepped closer. "Be careful, there are consequences to slander." I stared at him, something icy taking root in my chest. "And there are consequences to covering up a felony, Lieutenant." His face flickered just for a second, then he turned and left. That night I met with the paper chain at Felix's again. We were done gathering data. It was time to act. Carter made a call to a friend at the state attorney's office. Rose's sister, a paralegal, compiled all the theft and harassment claims into a tidy, chronological report. Felix's surveillance captured footage of Lorraine's husband removing a safe from their garage and loading it into a van. That same van had been seen during at least 3 prior inspections around the neighborhood. But the final stroke came from Miss Leona. She remembered something odd from a few months earlier. Lorraine had slipped up during a block party, bragging about a private stash she kept locked in her basement. Leona was tipsy, but she remembered Lorraine saying, "They don't know half the treasures we've picked up over the years." "We got a search warrant." "How, you ask?" The Reddit post caught the attention of a national consumer rights nonprofit that specialized in housing fraud. They had lawyers, they had reach, and they loved a good David versus Goliath story. With pressure mounting from public outcry and internal police scrutiny, the warrant was pushed through. But we didn't just hand it to the city police. We took it to the Arizona Bureau of Investigation. They executed the warrant on a cloudy Friday afternoon. It was like watching justice bloom in real time. Agents stormed Lorraine's house while we watched from Felix's garage, live streaming it all on Carter's phone. Neighbors peeked through blinds. News vans crowded the street again. The agents emerged hours later carrying evidence bags, hard drives, cash bundles, and one small wooden jewelry box with my grandmother's initials burned into the bottom. The ring was still inside. I didn't cry, not then. I just held it against my chest and felt everything, the fury, the fear, the helplessness, drain out of me like poison. I had it back. Not just the ring, but the part of me they tried to steal. The part that refused to be silent. Lorraine and her husband were arrested on the spot. Multiple counts of burglary, racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy to intimidate. Simmons, he was suspended pending an internal investigation. Last I heard, a separate probe was underway into how many other communities had been affected by similar HOA scams. But I wasn't done yet. Because Evergreen Hills still had an HOA. And there was still a board. You'd think once the queen and her consort were dethroned, the kingdom would heal. That people would celebrate. That they'd cheer on the neighbor who exposed the rot hiding behind hydrangeas and wrought iron fences. But Evergreen Hills didn't recover overnight. Lorraine may have been behind bars, but her fingerprints were everywhere. Her rules, her hand-picked replacements on the HOA board, her brand of fear, subtle, acidic, hard to scrub off, still lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. 2 of the remaining board members tried to play both sides. They released a statement claiming they were shocked and disappointed by Lorraine's actions, that they had no knowledge of any wrongdoing. But Felix, Rosa, and I already had proof they'd approved fake violation letters and cashed checks made out to Evergreen admin, an account Lorraine controlled exclusively. We weren't going to let them rewrite history. With the paper chain now a full-blown community force, we moved into Phase 2, reform. The first order of business was transparency. We drafted a petition to dissolve the existing board and hold new elections, with full oversight from a third-party nonprofit that specialized in fair housing governance. We handed out flyers, went door to door, talked to every resident who'd ever been slapped with a bogus fine or had their garden gnome mysteriously vanish. It was slow work. Some people still clung to the illusion that the HOA had protected them. Others feared retaliation or just didn't want to be involved. Then came the court documents. Thanks to the ABI investigation, we gained access to a trove of files retrieved from Lorraine's home and personal cloud accounts. Hidden inside them were spreadsheets, names, dates, valuables cataloged like inventory, entry successful, jewelry box target acquired, flag for pressure property undervalued. Over 50 homes. 50 victims. Some had moved away, others were still here, unaware they'd even been robbed. Lorraine had used break-ins not only to steal valuables, but to gather leverage, private documents, photos, debt information, anything that could be used to manipulate or shame. We didn't just share the documents, we held a town hall. Carter booked the local library's community room. Rosa printed enough packets for everyone. Felix brought donuts because of course he did. Over 70 residents showed up. Some out of curiosity, some out of cautious hope, some because they'd been burned and finally felt safe enough to speak. I stood in front of them and laid it out. The break-in, the ring, the network of theft and threats, the fake fees, the manipulated elections, Lorraine's downfall, and what we wanted to do next. I told them the truth. Evergreen Hills had never been an official, registered, mandatory HOA. It was a social club that mutated into a shadow government because no one challenged it. All Lorraine had done was exploit apathy and fear. But now, I said, we're awake. The room was silent, then someone clapped, then another, and then it was a wave, applause that shook the floor tiles and made something stir in my chest I hadn't felt in years belonging. A week later, the residents voted. 91% in favor of dissolving the existing board. We filed the legal paperwork and worked with housing attorneys to reclassify Evergreen Hills as a voluntary neighborhood association with no enforcement powers, only community outreach functions. No more fines, no more inspections, no more fear. But we weren't done rebuilding. We wanted to repair what Lorraine had broken: relationships, trust, the very idea of community. So we organized block parties, cleanup days, a shared tool shed for residents who couldn't afford repairs. Carter started a neighborhood newsletter, this time filled with real stories, real people, no propaganda. Rosa set up a free health screening station once a month in the park. Felix taught basic home repair to single moms and elderly residents. As for me, I was elected the first community liaison, a title we made up because we didn't want anyone to feel like there were rulers again. I wasn't in charge. I was a voice, a listener, a reminder. But there was still one more thread to pull. Because Lorraine hadn't acted alone. During the investigation, we found evidence that she'd been part of a much larger scheme, a network of fake or semi-legit HOAs all across the county. Some were abandoned housing projects where boards collected dues from ghost residents. Others were run by people just like Lorraine, power-hungry sociopaths hiding behind bylaws and fake badges. I reached out to a group of victims across the state. We began forming a coalition, sharing documents, press coverage, and strategies. With the help of the nonprofit, we submitted a formal request for a state-level audit of all active HOAs in Arizona. We were tired of fighting this battle one block at a time. I got a call one evening from Rosa, voice buzzing with excitement. "You're not going to believe it," she said. "The state attorney just announced a probe. They're naming it the Evergreen Bill." I sat down on my porch steps, blinking in the orange glow of sunset. I could see neighbors chatting in driveways, kids riding bikes again. Peace had returned, but not because we turned the other cheek. It returned because we stood up. Not just for ourselves, but for every person who's ever been silenced by someone hiding behind rules and power. And yet, just when I thought the storm had passed, something unexpected arrived. A letter, certified mail. It was from Lorraine. The envelope sat on my kitchen table like it carried disease. Cream-colored, thick paper, my name scrawled in rigid cursive across the front. No return address. Just the faint imprint of a law firm's stamp on the corner and that ominous red stripe screaming certified mail. I didn't open it right away. My gut twisted, not out of fear, but the kind of dread that comes from realizing the monster under your bed might still be breathing. Lorraine was behind bars awaiting trial. The community was rebuilding. We won, hadn't we? Still, I slid a knife under the flap and pulled the letter free. It was handwritten. "You think you've won, but you've just exposed the real game. I'm not the only one, you'll see. And when you do, remember this started with your ring, but it's ending with your name." Underneath was her signature, sloppy, almost unrecognizable, Lorraine Atwood. I read it twice then again, analyzing every inch of her chicken scratch like it might bleed out a clue. The threat was vague, but something about it felt unfinished. Not desperate, not angry, just cold, calculated. I forwarded it to the prosecutor's office and added it to the case file, but I didn't stop there. That night I went over every document we'd found, rewatched the footage from the break-in, rechecked the spreadsheets, and that's when I saw it. A name, repeated 3 times on different pages. C. Wyatt Handler. I'd skimmed past it before, assuming it was one of Lorraine's aliases or maybe a former resident. But now, it stared back at me like a cracked window no one noticed before the storm. Felix ran a background check. Rosa contacted her cousin at the tax assessor's office. Carter went full conspiracy mode and found 2 articles linking the name C. Wyatt to 3 dissolved HOAs in New Mexico, each riddled with accusations of embezzlement and harassment. Same pattern, same quiet settlements, same disappearances of personal property, rings, heirlooms, even firearms. And in all 3 cases, a woman named Lorraine Atwood had served as president before moving to Evergreen Hills. Lorraine wasn't just a bad seed, she was a transplant from a poisoned tree. And this C. Wyatt, he wasn't a ghost, he was real, some kind of consultant, fixer, or puppet master behind these HOA scams. A man who taught suburban predators how to weaponize bureaucracy, legal gray zones, and community fear. We tracked him down. Sort of. His full name was Clarence Wyatt, but he used half a dozen business entities: Wyatt Community Solutions, American Neighborhood Consultants, CW Equity. He never stayed in one place, no active address, no social media, no paper trail beyond shell companies and suspicious consulting fees buried in HOA financials across 5 states. But one thing was certain, Lorraine didn't act alone, and her fall had likely shaken the rest of this little empire. Which explained the letter. She wasn't warning me, she was baiting me. The trial began 6 weeks later. The courtroom overflowed. Former residents flew in to testify. News crews camped out. Lorraine arrived in a beige jumpsuit, hair limp, skin pale, eyes hollow. But the moment she saw me sitting on the front bench, wearing my grandmother's ring, her lips curled into a grin. I testified for 2 hours. The DA played the break-in footage, then introduced over 24 other victims. Rosa, Felix, Miss Leona, each one delivered stories like arrows, steady and sharp. In the end, Lorraine was convicted on multiple felony counts: burglary, fraud, criminal conspiracy. She received a 25-year sentence with no chance of parole for at least 15. Her husband flipped on her before the verdict even dropped. In exchange for a lighter sentence, he handed over a drive. That drive held everything. Financials, email chains, a map of HOAs across the Southwest marked in red, yellow, and green. Green stable, yellow compromised, red collapsed. Evergreen Hills, bright red. And one name kept appearing under the operational oversight section. C. Wyatt. I knew we'd only torn down one wall of the house. The whole structure needed burning. The story didn't end in court. It stretched out into a campaign, a wave, a reckoning. Rosa and I co-founded a grassroots organization, No More Silent Suburbia. We created a hotline for victims of HOA fraud and harassment, partnered with legal clinics and advocacy groups, hosted workshops to teach residents their rights. Within the first month, over 300 calls came in. Felix became our security director. Carter took over communications. Leona, yes, 78-year-old Leona, became our most beloved speaker at community meetings across the state. That woman could roast a corrupt board with the warmth of your grandma and the fire of a courtroom cross-examiner. Eventually, the Evergreen Bill passed. It mandated annual independent audits for all registered HOAs in Arizona, public access to all board records, and strict limitations on entering private property without law enforcement present. It also outlawed the practice of applying fines without a third-party arbitrator reviewing the case. Lorraine had tried to rule through fear. We chose to lead through truth. And yet every once in a while I still get mail from strange addresses, usually blank, sometimes with just a single symbol, an old HOA logo. We forward everything to the authorities, but I know Clarence Wyatt is still out there. Somewhere. I wear the ring every day now, not because of its value but because of what it survived, what I survived. It reminds me of my grandmother, of what it means to hold on to something when the world wants to rip it away, to fight for it. And when new victims write to us, scared and uncertain, I tell them this. You're not crazy. You're not alone. And you're not powerless. Because the moment you speak, they lose their grip. The paper chain started with a stolen ring, but it grew into something stronger than steel. A movement. A revolution. A home worth protecting.